have them before greening versus after greening, nor with the Valencia before or after. So he's been able to maintain, and I think that's the key here, is that he never let his growth decline or go down in production. He started the program immediately when he found out he had greening in spring of 2006. It was found in Miami in the fall of 2005, and it showed up in broccoli in his grove and a couple of others spring of 2006. So that's why the greening here starts in the 2005-06 season, because that's when that season the trees had greening, but there's not a whole lot of difference in its production. What we did, actually Mike Irie went in there in 2000, he turned to the second one that had all the little plus signs on it. We started monitoring his growth as we were beginning to start our trials. Because our trial started in 2008. So in 2008, Mike Irie selected a block in his Valencias, his old Valencias, that were planted in 1992. So they were 20 years old. And in his young block, which was planted in 2002, both Valencias took a block of 100 trees within one of his commercial blocks and started doing PCR on it to kind of get a feel for the rate of increase. Because back in those years, we didn't know how fast this stuff was going to spread. So if you look at the January of 2008, that block was 40% positive in 2008. After they found it in 2006, by 2008, 2 years later, it was 40% effective. Those same results in 2010, because our sampling was every other year. We did it in 2008, 2010, and 2012, this year. And we did it always in January. And you can see in 2 years, it went from 40% to 91%. So the green was moving through there pretty rapidly, but yet his production was still holding. Now if you go to the next sheet, you'll see his young Valencia block. His young Valencia block was just adjacent to one of his older Valencia blocks. There was nothing but, growth road between them. And so the infection rate in those young trees, of course they were vigorous, quite attractive to psyllids, and he was getting on a psyllid control program at that point with speed sprayers. After a year or two, he went to the foggers. He tried all the fogging and the low volume stuff. Currently, for the last 3 years, he's pretty much been on an airplane. And the airplane seems to work really well, and it's fast, and it's not as expensive. But even the young block in 2008 was 81% infected when we did that first survey. 2 years later, it was 100% infected and positive. Now, if you go to your next page that has both mature and young block, you'll see what the results were this January, a few months ago. The overall PCR positive trees went to 95%. So they went from 2010, they were, let's see if must be this one. Okay, so they went from 2010 at 91%. In the last 2 years, they actually only went up 4 more %. So he's at 95% in his mature trees. And not supposed to do that. Okay. And the young block is still 100%. So his infection rate, essentially for that grove, is running about 100%. Now we set up trials both in Hamlin and in Valencia. First one I'm going to talk about is the Hamlin block that's on our experiment station there in Immokalee. And if you look at the yields for this past year, you can see we're basically getting about a little over 2 boxes per tree on the better treatments. And the better treatments are the 2 and 3. Through the years, it's been 9 and 1. 9 is the full boy, but without the hydrogen peroxide that he puts in. The treatment number 2, which is always right at the top for yield, is the full boy, but without the SARs. That would be no cyanamide and no salicylic acid. And there is probably a real chance that when you add the, of course it doesn't have hydrogen peroxide in it either. When you throw the hydrogen peroxide in, it's going to react with those metals that are in there from all of the sulfate, manganese, zinc, and all the rest of it. But every year, treatment number 2, which is mainly the micronutrients, the macronutrients with a nitrogen source and a potassium source, and a phosphide. Basically, is treatment number 2. Comes out on top every year. Now, treatment number 3 is real interesting because it has moved up into one of the top 4 slots. It started out mediocre. It is just the micronutrients alone. And it's always been good, but it's never been as good as when you had a nitrogen source with it. But it has now moved up this year into a rather good stage. Now when I tell you we're picking 2 boxes of tree off of it, we're talking about trees that are about this tall. Probably between 7 and 8 feet tall. These are more or less young Hamlin trees. And there really isn't a whole lot of difference there between most of those treatments. In the top part, you see the little A there telling you there's really no significant difference there. It's when you get down to the treatments which would be 5, 6, and 8 that do not have the micronutrients in them. They're always the lower part of the table. The micronutrients are a key part to ameliorating the symptoms of manganese and zinc deficiency. It also has boron in there because we had boron deficiency for the first 2 years because we didn't have boron in this mix, and we added that. The more he puts boron on through the ground, we're putting it on through that spray mix as a foliar feed. And we eliminated the main corking on the leaves when we added the boron because that started to develop in 2009. When we started the test in 2008, 2009, we had the corky vein begin to show up, but we cured it up with about 1 good application of the boron. But now we just continue to add a low amount of boron every time we spray. We kind of added that to the spray mix. Okay, if you turn to the next one, you'll see the 2007 canker incidents. We got blasted in those Hamlins last year with canker, as a lot of other people did throughout the state. And the severity of the canker, if you look at the chart here, we had pretty high losses, up to almost a box per tree off of some of those trees when we accounted for all of the fruit drop. We actually went in there and we removed the fruit from underneath the tree every week, and we counted the amount of fruit that fell. And it's always related to the more vigorous treatments. The ones that made the tree grow the most and produce the most fruit also provided enough continual young foliage for the canker, and we could not get ahead of it. So that is an incident that's very similar to what Jim is talking about, in that the more vigor you push for susceptible tissue you've got out there for infection. So you've got to control the disease. And we've already put our first copper on several weeks, about 3 weeks ago. And we're about to put our second application of copper on those hamlins, hopefully before this weekend, to protect against the rain that's coming. Hopefully we're going to get rain.
Question, boss. Usually recommended canker program in the spring?
No. Well, we're following that model that Megan and I guess Timber Health Development that's on the computer, that copper model that's on there. We were on that. So we were spraying based on the weather conditions based on that model. So if you consider that the standard program. We did, well, where we messed up, and I think a lot of other people did, we didn't start as early as we probably should have with the copper. And so we figured we had a fairly dry period in March and April, so we didn't really go out there actively and vigorously keep copper on there. And we had some rains in, I think it was the first week in May, I think, that kicked that off. And we really didn't, we put out a very early copper, and then we hadn't done anything until my strategy was, well, we'll just wait until we have some rains, then we'll start spraying as we get towards rainy season. So I think I messed up on that one. But again, I was trying not to put any more copper out there than I had to. And once it kicked in, once the stuff kicked in, we got big losses in September of fruit drop. But we did a canker rating, and this canker rating was done by our pathologist, Pam Roberts. That's why it says courtesy of Pam Roberts, because she works on canker. And she did the canker rating for me, and this is her result of how much loss we were getting. We were doing the fruit pickup and so forth. But they rated the trees for canker and everything, I think every 2 weeks. And we just couldn't get a hold of the canker, but she did the canker rating for us. All right, we go to the next one, I believe is the one that says 2009, 2010, the root study. We've been doing this, we started back in 2009, did it again in 2010. We've done it again in 2011, but I don't have all the results analyzed for 2011. Now these trees, again, this is still our Hamlin study, and these trees were 100% infected with greening when we started this in 2008. And in fact, Phil Stansley, Dr. Stansley, was doing a lot of the trials in these hamlins. It resulted in verifying that the imidacloprid in Meyer works for soil control on young trees, and he was also did a lot of pioneering work that resulted in the platinum material that's now been available, got done in this block. So when we took this block over, it was not in good shape. In fact, he couldn't do any more studies in there because the trees were at the point where they were out of production and he couldn't get them to flush. And he had been cutting those trees back on a regular basis to make them flush to attract the psyllium. The result is he ended up with a block that was very heavily infected, 100%. So we took it over with the idea that could we even bring something like this back? Now in a minute I'm going to show you the results of our Valencia trial. It's a commercial block that didn't quite have that kind of stress on it. So I'll tell you straight up, I did not have much confidence that we'd be able to bring this block back. And all through 2008 when we made these treatments, the trees did not respond at all. It took a year. But in spring of 2009, these trees came out with a tremendous flush, unbelievable. I even took pictures of it. And we started taking pictures of every tree in the trial from both the bed top and the swale side. So we got a good documentation on those. You've probably seen them. You came to some of the presentations I made. I've used them at Steve Futch's production school up here in years past. So that block was out of production, and my thought was, with this flush, I wonder if it would put on any fruit, and it did. So it took us a year to keep those trees, but this was a recovery thing that I really didn't have a whole lot of confidence that we'd be able to do it because it was 100% effective. Our Valencia trial that I'm going to talk about in a minute across the street at the commercial grove was about 40% effective when we started. And I figured, well, might be able to work with that. So this was amazing to me too. So we started this root study in there because supposedly at that time we were told, and we still believe, that the pathogen is moving to the roots, and you're going to get root loss, root slumping. Basically, the root system is going to die out from underneath the tree with this greening. And so we started looking at roots. And we did it in 2009, 2010. Like I said, we did it again this year. We just don't have it all processed because the number of root samples we pull are over 1,000. It takes one man, one person that I have in the lab, work for 8 weeks to measure and scan to get the root density as to how many roots are there. So it's a long process. And then you got to do a bunch of manipulation on it. You have to do conversions and so forth on the computer, which we're doing right now. Anyway, the first year we went in and we took under each tree, we looked at northeast, south and west quadrant of the tree. The second year we went in and we went off by 45 degrees, so we wouldn't be anywhere near the holes we'd done the year before. And the result is that if you look at the bottom left-hand corner, definitely there were more roots in the top 6 inches and fewer roots in the 6 to 12 inch deal. Nothing new. We all know generally that that's what it's going to be on a flatwood soil. The interesting thing is, if you look at the root density, which is the other part down there, you notice, or even the up above, the root density in 2009 increased in 2010 by about 50%. Those numbers are about 50% higher, the ones in the little blue background. And if you look at it by treatment over here on the right-hand side, every one of those numbers, actually the root density increased by about 50%. I'm really interested to see what the root density has done this year. We should have those probably processed within sometime in May. So
those letters A, B, C,